Okay, so today we have, I think, the ninth lecture, and then we are almost at the end of the first unit. So we are on schedule as far as the syllabus is concerned. So what we are going to study today is nuclear spin and magnetic moment. And we'll start with nuclear spin. So nuclear spin and magnetic moment are nothing but intrinsic property of the nucleus. So whenever you are considering a electron and it is revolving around the nucleus, it does revolve around the nucleus, but it also spins around its own axis. So these two separate phenomena, number one, the revolution around the nucleus, and number two, the spin around along its own axis, gives out different results. Okay, gives out different magnetic field, you can say, which actually gives rise to something which we call as the magnetic moment. But then when we come to nuclear spin, because the neutrons and the protons are so closely bound, tightly packed, if we look into the net effect, it more or less behaves as a single entity. So that means the entire nucleus can be considered to give a single effect of spin or magnetic moment. But then if we want to analyze it, we have to go to the separate understanding of the nuclear spin of neutron and proton. Very important. So we'll start with nuclear spin. So in general, when we talk about spin, I think this is simple. What happens is we basically say that you have, let's say this is your axis, and then it will actually revolve around the nucleus. Okay, let's take the example of electrons. Let's not take the example of nucleus now, and then it revolves. So this will actually give rise to one kind of spin. Okay, but then when the electron revolves around its own axis, okay, it basically gives rise to something which is called the spin effect. Okay, so basically we know that if it is clockwise or anti-clockwise, depending on that, the spin of the electron will be considered as plus half or minus half. So these all are something which we know as the quantum number. And then what are the values that the spin can take, what are the values that the angular momentum can have, are all quantum mechanical concepts. So whenever I say something is quantum mechanical in nature, we mean that we are talking about a quantized state. So that means we are considering something which exists in quantity. So that means if it is plus half and minus half, in between there might not be any value. So that is important. But on the other hand, if you combine the number of electron and find out the total spin, then I can take half plus half plus half, which is 3 by 2. Or I can take half plus half, let's say one is anti-spin, so minus half, so the total is half. So it will always be a half integer spin. So similar ideas are there, and then this same idea is also used in nuclear spin. So what happens is in nuclear spin, these are the most important points to understand, that in general, we talk about angular momentum, total angular momentum. And total angular momentum is basically nothing but a combination of orbital angular momentum and spin angular momentum. For the same reason, as I said, revolving around the nucleus and of course around its own axis. I'm just talking about electrons right now. But when we talk about the nuclear spin, this total angular momentum is equivalent to nuclear spin, which is I. So if in atomic and molecular physics, you study the total angular momentum, here we study the nuclear spin. Both of them are relevant with each other, or we can say that they are more or less analogous to each other. Okay, so important. So we are going to go into more details, so don't worry. So what happens is the total angular momentum of a nucleus. So this is the total angular momentum of a nucleus is given by nuclear spin. So please remember, very important, that whenever I say that the total angular momentum is I for a nucleus, I'm talking about the nuclear spin here. Okay, why, which will become slowly clear. Okay, slowly clear why we take them together. So basically, if you consider just electrons, so what we are going to do is we are going to draw a comparison between the electrons properties, intrinsic properties in terms of the quantum numbers with the nucleus. So when we consider an electron, we basically have it in atoms. They do have a distinct electron spin and of course a distinct electron orbital angular momentum. So whenever we want to find out the total angular momentum, we basically consider the spin, the electron spin, okay, and then of course the electron orbital angular momentum, usually we represent it by L. So if we write it down as L plus S, we are writing down the total angular momentum of the electron. So these two has got different effect. We combine them and find out the total angular momentum. It's not very far from classical physics, because in classical physics also we talk about conservation of angular momentum in doing the normal numericals. Okay, so when we take these ideas, we say consider all the angular momentum possible. So in electron also we have an angular momentum because of the spin and of course because of the orbital motion around the nucleus. Please remember here that we are considering the electron is revolving around the nucleus. It doesn't mean that it will revolve around the same path, but for assumption we are doing it, and we see that that doesn't change much the value of the total angular momentum. So, but then what happens in nuclei? Why we consider this as nuclear spin? So, if we consider a nuclei, what happens is they are basically a single entity. So, all the neutrons and protons are jam-packed together and they are in a very close vicinity. So, what happens is they are actually acting as a single entity. And then this has got an intrinsic angular momentum, which refers to the nuclear spin, because that total angular momentum of the nucleus is responsible for the spin of the nuclei, which seems to be from a single entity. And that's why we are considering this as the nuclear spin. We are going to go into more and more detail of this. Nuclear spin is very important in this. Probably we are going to go till the last unit. We are going to discuss almost in every unit. So associated with each nuclear spin is basically a nuclear magnetic moment. I've got different slides for magnetic moment. So basically what happens is if there is a nuclear which is spinning, it will definitely have a nuclear magnetic moment for the simple reason that nucleus is not uncharged. We're not considering the atom as a whole, which is neutral. But if you just consider the nuclei, it basically is having some charge. So if it has got some charge, that means it can actually has the capacity to generate some current. If it has got the capacity to generate some current, it will definitely generate some kind of magnetic field. So when we know the magnetic moment, that means we know how intense is the charge or how intense is the field that it produces, maybe the magnetic field or the electric field. Okay, so that's very important. So in general, when we talk about magnetic moment, it produces a magnetic interaction with its environment. So that means if you're basically having a magnetic field around the nucleus, it definitely is going to affect its property. In fact, this particular feature is also used to determine other properties of nuclei. Okay, so in general, you can say that if you are actually bringing a magnetic field near a nuclei, the energy levels will get split. Okay, so these ideas we already have it from atomic physics, very basic. So energy level will basically split. Okay, so these kind of effects can be observed by using a magnetic field. Okay, so even if people didn't knew initially that whether the nuclei had charge or not, whenever these effects were observed, it became more and more sure that yes, it has charge. The only task was to find out what is the charge and from where the charge is coming and how to define the charge and understand everything. A lot of things are still unanswered. We still need to find a lot of things in nuclear physics, because it's difficult to read something accurately on a quantum mechanical regime. More or less, it is probabilistic in nature. We already know about these things. So if you look into a nuclei of, let's say, an odd mass number A, so it will basically have a half integer spin. So please remember, it will have a half integer spin. Maybe it will be half 3 by 2, 5 by 2, okay, like that. Okay, it's not like it will have only half integer spin. It might have 3 by 2 and all. I'll show you some examples here. So if you consider mass number, let's say 15 for nitrogen, you basically have 7 protons and 8 neutrons. Okay, so that one particular neutron will actually add to the additional spin that we have. So this is actually half integer spin why it comes. So basically, if you consider a nuclei of even A, it will have integer spin. The reason might be that you will have unpaired neutrons and protons, because of which it will give rise to an integer spin. Okay, you can add up the spins and then it will be giving an integer spin 1, 2, 3, and so on. But then we are going to see more details of that. But on the other hand, all nuclei with even Z, so if we have the nuclei with even Z and even N, they will basically have a nuclear spin I is equal to 0. So these are not like you cannot just take an example and try to understand this. This is the general statement. There are some specific cases which might be different. that is actually more clear from nuclear shell model. In fact, there is a very interesting question in nuclear shell model which deals with this, okay, which one of the element why the nuclear spin is different from what is being predicted by the theory. So we're going to look into it, okay. So this is a very general statement, okay. And then if we just look into, let's say, the atomic mass or the isotopes of iron, if you just look into the isotopes of iron here, and then if you look into some example, let's say this. So we have got basically 26 protons and then 26 minus 52, that is 28 neutrons, okay. So what happens is we have got an even number of Z and we have got an even number of neutrons and protons. So that means the spin becomes 0. Now these spins can also be determined experimentally, okay, possible. On the other hand, if you consider this, you have got 26 and this 26, okay, and then this is a different isotope altogether. Doesn't mean there are 3 neutrons, okay, there might be 2 neutron, 1 proton, and so on, okay. We just look into that, but then it will basically give rise to 3 unpaired particles, because of which the spin might be 3 by 2, okay. But then there are some exceptions, as I told you, so just don't go with the count that it is 3, then 2 should cancel, only half should remain. That might not happen, okay. So we have to look into that, but we will come to that later. Similarly, if you look into the other isotopes, even, so it becomes 0. This becomes again even, but the mass number is odd. So if this is 26, that might be the number of neutrons might be 28, okay. So then it is or 28 or 30, 30, yeah, 26 and 30. So then it will be just 1, so it becomes half and so on. So these kind of results are there. So basically this is an example for isotopes of iron, okay. This is an important example. You can look into other examples also. But then this is just a preliminary idea of nuclear spin. We are going to go to more and more details of this. So then if you just consider this normal idea that in general, we know that nuclei will actually have protons and neutrons. Here the dark ones are the new protons and the light ones are the neutrons, the unshaded ones. But then this entire entity will basically behave as a single particle. So I'm just considering this as a single particle, and it will basically have a spin, okay, which might be clockwise or anti-clockwise. Depending on that, you can have the nuclear spin also as plus half or minus half, okay. And inside also each neutron and proton, you can consider the spin separately. But since all of this spin add okay, I think the network went off. Am I back? Okay, I'm back. Okay. So mobile network is having a problem. Okay, we'll continue. So this entire nuclei will basically behave as a single entity, and this will result in the different spin altogether. Let's just look into some mathematical aspect of this, which is important. Okay, take a lot of time to actually write this down. Okay, so I hope that all of you please note it, because this is starting from preliminary and we are going to advanced. So basically when we talk about the nuclear spin, I'm just considering nuclear spin now, forget about electrons. We basically call it as the spin angular momentum, which is nothing but again a combination of L and S. Okay, so what is my L? L is the orbital angular momentum and S is the spin angular momentum. But then if I want to find out the nuclear spin, the total nuclear spin, I have to consider the orbital angular momentum and the spin angular momentum of all the nuclei. That's why this summation is very important. So in general, what happens is that if you basically consider this summation of Li, that means L1 would be the orbital angular momentum of, let's say, the first proton. L2 would be the orbital angular momentum of the second proton, and we keep on adding them. So I'll get the total orbital angular momentum. Also, when we talk about the spin, we can talk about the first, the second, and then add them up, and I get the total here. Okay, but then in general, when we electron, we are considering a single electron, okay, and then taking the total spin. If you consider the entire atom, that's a different case. But in general, we are just considering, let's say, a single electron and trying to study it. Can we actually really study a single electron system? This is a different debate altogether, because these are all idealistic nature. If we understand a part of the system, we can extrapolate and relate it to the entire system's behavior and see if it behaves the same way, and then try to understand. That is how physics works, okay, for simplifying things. So in general, I think this is also known to you. When we use quantum mechanics, we can actually talk about the quantization, and then we can actually talk about I, which is nothing but root over of I into I plus 1 h cross. So we are writing it down in terms of h cross, okay, because quantum mechanics, because Planck's constant is important, okay. So we are always writing these down in terms of h cross. And then of course the magnitude is this, and this is quantized because this value that I can take can be 0, half, 1, 3 by 2, and so on. So this is actually nothing but what we call as the nuclear spin. Now, why this is important? This is important because the behavior of the nuclei will depend on its spin angular momentum and its magnetic moment. Right? To be more technical in nature. Also, when you go for any kind of, let's say, entrance exam and all, they do ask you these kind of questions, these tricky questions, okay, important. So if these concepts are clear more or less, you can actually go back to your numerical problems and check and then just relate it with this, okay. So you have to do it from your end because we definitely don't have time for preparation of other exams, okay, it becomes a bit difficult. So then what happens is we basically go to, let's say, the space quantization part. So what happens in space quantization is when we basically consider the orientation of the nuclear spin, okay, or the nuclear spin angular momentum, that is I, it is more or less in the with respect to the z direction. So that means that Iz is very important, okay, not only for this, even if you consider something like an electron's spin, the orientation and all, it is always considered with respect to the z axis, okay, because see, the revolution of the electron around the nuclei is in a two-dimensional space, which is in the xy coordinate, okay, and then the orientation will be respect to the z coordinate. So that's why Iz is important, okay, very basic, okay, very basic idea. There are more details into it in atomic and molecular physics. So whenever you write down Iz, we can actually also write it down in terms of another quantum number, which is basically called m, okay. So if you write down m h cross, this will actually give you an idea of the space quantization. So how the nuclear spin or the spin angular momentum of the nuclei is oriented about the space, about the z-axis, is given by this space quantization equation. Okay, so you can just generally call it as a space quantization equation. And this m value, which again quantized, and then these are given as minus I minus 1 up to 0, and then it goes to plus I. So if you consider the total values, you basically have got this 1, 2, 3, and up to this particular point, and then you take these points and then you just add a 0 to it because 0 is also possible. So basically have 2I plus 1 values. So sometimes when you are studying atomic molecular physics or nuclear physics, selection rule is something which you come across again and again. Okay, that's a technical term. So basically, whenever something is quantized, there is some selection rule. That means what are the values that are possible for it to acquire. Okay, so these are the selection rules here. Okay, so these selection rules are important. So in exam, if I'm asking you write down the selection rule, it's important that you remember these equations and basically produce it in your exam. Okay, very important. Please try to explain the terms, okay? Please just don't write it down point wise as if it's a PowerPoint presentation. Don't prefer that, okay? So let's just go back to this even nuclear thing and let's take some example and let's see what is the nuclear spin. So when we talk about an even nuclei, helium may be one of the simplest nuclei that we can actually consider. 2 proton, 2 neutron, even proton, even neutron, even carbon, 6 proton, 6 neutron. There is no nuclear spin because there is a pairing effect. Okay, so this is the pairing effect that I'm talking about. So we basically consider 2 neutrons. One may be spin up, the other will be spin down. They tend to pair up because in semi-empirical mass formula also we have seen something which is called a pairing effect. This and this is related. So basically we have got the neutron up and spin down, both of them combined to give you a net nuclear spin as 0. Similarly, the proton will combine and then. So if there is one neutron or one proton which is left alone, okay, जिसको अकेला छोड़ दिया, उसका अपना spin रहेगा, that will have its own spin that will affect the total nuclear spin. So if you consider this here, we have got a neutron, let's say for example, definitely just one neutron, so it will have a spin half. If you consider a hydrogen, okay, atom basically will again have spin half because it has just got one proton there. And then we have got the helium one, okay, which is an isotope, okay, basically 3H2 He2, not 4He2. So then we have got the nitrogen example, which I've given you in the previous slide. So this is about the even odd nuclei. So in exam, I might ask you that what is nuclear spin? Explain the concept with examples. So when I tell you explain the concept with examples, probably you should concentrate on this and not on the iron example. That is just the beginning, okay? You can ignore that part. But I think if you, for example, this will be a better answer, okay? And if you explain it properly, this question usually deserves 5 marks, okay? So please keep a note of that. And then if you consider something like odd nuclei, basically, you have this nitrogen, okay? But then that's a different isotope, 7 nitrogen. So if you consider 7 nitrogen, you basically have got 7 proton and 7 neutron. So basically the 6 neutrons and the 6 protons will pair up with each other, okay? The proton will pair up, the neutron will pair up, and they will cancel the spin effect. But then you have got 1 proton and 1 neutron which are left alone, which has got spin half. So basically 1 proton and 1 neutron, each has got spin half, so it will be total spin 1. So that is possible, okay? So that is happening, but then this pairing effect is only between the similar nuclei, okay? It's like neutron, proton, not the other way around, okay? And then we have got this deuterium, okay? We are going to study about deuterium in the next chapter. We are going to study it in very detail because deuterium is basically nothing but more or less preliminary to understand the use of quantum mechanics in nuclear physics. So you can take deuterium as the simplest example, okay? And then try to find out what are its energy states, eigenvalues, and so on. So we're going to do it in the next chapter. So this is basically what is nuclear spin is all about. So deuterium in its core has got 1 neutron and 1 proton, both cannot pair up, so basically it will have a half plus half 1 spin. So these are some examples, 5 marks question, please don't miss out, okay? Next, magnetic moment. So what is magnetic moment? So before I go to what is magnetic moment, let me just talk about this. I think this is something which you have studied in your higher secondary, even in your lower classes. When you studied in this in your class 11, 12, probably you have taken a qualitative idea, a quantitative idea rather. You've done some mathematical calculations. For example, let's say you studied about Biot-Savart's law and all. So what happens in general is very simple. When we study about electromagnetism, we know that if there is an electric field, we do have a magnetic field from there. And of course, you can also generate an electric field from a magnetic field and a magnetic field from an electric field. So let's consider a current carrying loop. Okay, this is a very simple question. Okay, we do have a current carrying loop, and what happens is that the current is flowing in, let's say, in this direction, clockwise. Okay, and then we can use the right hand thumb rule or the left hand. Okay, right hand thumb rule. Okay, I think that is, sorry, left hand thumb rule. We have the left hand thumb rule we basically can use and find out what is the direction of the magnetic field. So when we see the magnetic field, we do observe that the magnetic field will be in a direction perpendicular to the current carrying conductor. So basically this will form a ring. Imagine it to be a 3D diagram, and this is the magnetic field that is being generated, let's say, in all the directions. Okay, so you do have the effect up to infinity, at least theoretically, but then the effect is felt substantially if you come very near to the current carrying conductor. So if you consider this, you can actually say that this current carrying loop behaves like a magnet, and it basically has got a north pole and a south pole. Very important. So if you consider a current carrying conductor, you want to know what is the north pole and the what is south pole. So if you look from the top, and let's say it is the current is flowing in the, let's say, in the clockwise direction, okay, in this direction. If it flows in this direction, that upper part of the loop will actually show the south pole. And then if you look into the lower part of this, I think these things you have already studied. You can draw an N like this. This will actually represent the north pole. So what happens is if you look into the current carrying loop from upwards, it will behave as a south pole. From downwards, it will behave as a north pole. For the simple reason that a magnetic monopole cannot exist. So that means the current carrying loop must have a south pole and a north pole. So this is the idea that we already have. And from here, we develop the idea of magnetic moment. At the very outset, I said that what do you mean by magnetic moment? So magnetic moment simply means that you want to know what is the intensity of that magnetic field. Okay, let's say I have a current flowing through an area, okay, covering an area, let's say A. I want to know what is the net effect of the magnetic field that it has. That idea can be given by magnetic moment. Okay, So magnetic moment can be categorized and based on two different reasons. Okay, there are two different reasons that basically there is a magnetic moment. First, there is an intrinsic charge. So a charge exists within the system. If you consider just a proton, just an electron, they do have a charge within them, and that is the one reason for having a magnetic moment. But then if you just have a charge, and if there is no movement of the charge, basically you don't have a current generated. Okay, so basically you have the magnetic moment because of the intrinsic charge and of course due to the angular momentum of the system. So if you basically consider, let's say, a proton, it does have a spin, okay, because of which an angular momentum is generated. On the other hand, the nucleus is also spinning. So that means basically we can say that the net angular momentum that it has will give rise to a magnetic moment. So the magnetic moment might be very less, okay, the value might be very low, but the thing is it forms an important part of nuclear physics because we can actually derive a lot of property of the nuclei studying the magnetic moment. So if you just look into the relation for magnetic moment, this is basically given by mu, okay. So mu is equal to current into area. So this is important, okay. So we basically have mu is equal to current into area. And then if you want to find out the magnetic moment, you can just simply use this relation and then solve. But then before we go to the nuclei, let's just revise a bit of magnetic moment which we learned on electron. So as I said, I think I've already given you a proper understanding of the basics here. So we basically have an electron revolving around the nucleus. So we know current is equal to charge per unit time. So the electron will basically have a charge of minus E. Okay, let's not ignore the minus sign right now. We have got E by T. So we have got current by charge. And then it will basically have time, right? Sorry, T is time. So time. So we know time is equal to distance divided by velocity. If we assume that it is following a circular loop, and the radius is r, that is the distance from the center of the nuclei, then we can say it is 2 pi r covering the distance divided by velocity. So you can just simply replace the value here and then we can actually write down this is minus ev divided by 2 pi r. So this is the relation for current with respect to the velocity, okay, for what do you say, an electron. So then if you want to find out the magnetic moment, that means you have to find out what is I into A. So I already found out I is minus EV by R 2 pi R, and the area of the loop is nothing but pi R square. So then you can just do the maths and then you find out that this is nothing but minus EVR divided by 2. Initially, when you start with physics, maybe this is a problem, but whenever you get this relation now V into R, you straight away know that if you multiply mass with it, you get something which is called the angular momentum. Now we have given enough explanation that why angular momentum is important. And that's why in magnetic moment also, we are going to involve angular momentum because magnetic moment is a consequence of intrinsic charge, which is here, and the angular momentum, which is mv into r. So we just multiply it by mvr. There is no mv on m on numerator. We'll just divide it by m. So it is minus el divided by 2m. So this is the classical picture of the magnetic moment. Okay, classically also magnetic moment is predicted. Quantum mechanically, of course, H cross comes in. So when we talk about the classical picture, this is the magnetic moment. So classically, the magnetic moment might not have intrinsic values. It might be continuous and so on. But quantum mechanically, this is not continuous, which is more appropriate. So what we see here is that this particular magnetic moment is proportional to the angular momentum, right? So I think this is clear to you, angular momentum. Okay, so momentum is nothing but mass into velocity, but then we are talking about angular velocity. Angular velocity is v cross r. Okay, and then if the angle direction is 90 degree, then basically it is v into r. So I think that is basic. Okay, so we have the classical picture of angular momentum. So sorry, magnetic moment. So how do we go to the quantum mechanical picture? It's simple. We'll just involve h cross here. Okay, so if you basically consider the spin of the electron now, we basically consider the spin of the electron. The orbital angular momentum mu, okay, is given by minus gl into el by 2m. This is important. So this G is basically called the G factor, okay, which is actually there because this is derived in your atomic physics, okay. So I'm not going to derive this, but I think this should know this. And you know that if you consider an electron for the orbital angular momentum, the value of GL is nothing but 1. Very important for entrance exams also. So the value of GL is 1 for an electron. Okay, this is orbital angular momentum. Okay, so we are basically considering the orbital angular momentum here. We are considering the spin angular momentum here. If we consider the spin magnetic moment, the relation remains the same. There will be a minus GS there. So in quantum mechanical picture, we do have a constant which comes in GL and GS. Is it different from this? Not much. It's minus EL by 2m. We're just multiplying it with a constant value, which should be there to do the correction. Because if we multiply it with this constant value, it becomes more quantized. You see 1, 2, 3. So it will be multiples of some value. So basically what happens is, because of these, okay, because of whatever reasons we have stated, the electron will usually behave as a bar magnet. So it will have a north pole and a south pole. It moves around, it generates a current, it will basically behave as a bar magnet. But then we have to find out what is the values of L and S, okay? So that means we have to talk about the quantization of angular momentum. Again, getting back into the basics of quantum mechanics, L is equal to root over of L into L plus 1 H cross. I think you have done it numerous times. And S is equal to root over of S into S plus 1 H cross. So if we just consider the Z component of the orbital magnetic angular momentum, it is ml into H cross, and the Z component of the spin angular momentum, it is ms into H cross. And then the spin can be either plus half or minus half in terms of H cross, of course. Okay, so I think this is not something new, but I'm just giving it because this is important from nuclear physics point of view also. So when we talk about this Lz and Sz, basically these are nothing but the component in the direction of the external magnetic field. So if you basically apply an external magnetic field, in which direction the components like the orbital magnetic moment and the spin magnetic moment align themselves is nothing but the Z direction. And this is why Lz and Sz is important, because what happens is, if you want to study about the nuclear property, it's important that you give some external field to it and try to see what are the changes, and that's why this is being studied. This sometimes seems to be a bit confusing because you are not doing it practically, but the thing is, if you understand the theory, you will understand what is the essence of this particular topic. So then if you just consider it in terms of H cross now, so we are just going to look at it in terms of H cross. What we do is we're going to take the same relation, mu is equal to minus GL into EL by 2M. Okay, so see, this is the difficulty with slides. I cannot just keep on giving the previous slide again and again. In the board, at least I can write down everything, but then I can just go back. So you have this mu is equal to minus GL into EL by 2M. I'm going to write it down in terms of H cross. So what I can do is I can divide and multiply by H cross. Okay, so let's do it. So what I do is I multiply by H cross, I divide by H cross. So then I have got EH cross by 2M. Now this is something which you might already remember. Okay, the Bohr magneton. Okay, the Bohr magneton. Okay, so this is something which is important, and this is EH cross divided by 2M, and this is called the Bohr magneton, and this actually has a constant value involved. Okay, because you know charge is constant, Planck's constant is constant. If you consider electron mass is constant, we're just talking about electrons here, not about protons or not about neutrons. Okay, so just going into this clear picture of electron, and then we will shift to proton and neutron, and we see that the picture is not much different. So what happens is here that this will be minus GL into mu b. So this mu b is nothing but Bohr magneton, constant value. Please remember this value. Sometimes this is asked. Okay, this is also important for your exam. The unit should also be known to you. EV per Tesla. Okay, you can just do the calculation and see that yes, it comes in terms of magnetic field. And simplify this, and then it is L divided by H cross. Multiply this. That's all. Similarly, we talk about the spin magnetic moment. And when we talk about the spin magnetic moment, we have got ES, and again multiply and divide by H cross and do a similar calculation, you get this particular result. So this is what are the results that we have for electrons. In this 2 or 3 slides, I've tried to include all the topic. This is usually a 1 class lecture, but then these are already known to you. So we are just doing it in short. And then we can just try to relate it with the nucleus. Okay, so just like you have the mass of the electron and charge of the electron here, and then we basically call it as the Bohr magneton. If we include the mass of proton here, the charge more or less remains the same. If we just include the mass of proton here, that is called nuclear magneton, which is the important part in our syllabus. So we are shifting from here to there, but the concept doesn't change. Okay, so even if you're studying nuclear physics, you're just talking about the nuclear magneton, not the Bohr magneton. That's the difference. Okay, so representation can be considered for nuclear. So similar representation. So we basically have nuclear magneton for nuclear particles, and then we just write it down as mu n and not b. Mu b is Bohr, n is nuclear. So you have got EH cross by 2 MP, and then if you do the calculation, you find out this result. So you can look here, 3.15 into 10 to the power minus 8 eV per Tesla. What about electrons? See, the value is 10 to the power minus 5 eV per Tesla. For the simple reason that the mass is at the denominator and the electron has got a mass 4 orders different from that of proton. Okay, in fact less than that. So basically the effect or the magnetic effect that it will have will be more. But then if you consider nucleus, you basically have the proton there, and then the nuclear magnetic moment is basically nothing but different altogether. It's actually minus 8, so less. So the effect is less. Okay, so that is there. And then you can again consider the quantization of the spin, and then you've got ms h cross, and then ms is equal to plus minus half. So what happens is neutron and proton can precess with respect to z-axis. This is one of the rules. Okay, but in general, if you look into it experimentally, it has been observed that the neutron and proton can precess with respect to z-axis. They usually precess with respect to z-axis. Okay, so in I think in atomic and molecular physics, you have seen this diagram, and then different precisions are considered, and then the m values are here. So this is one precision, and then this is another precision. Okay, this side is positive spin, negative spin, and so on. So these things you can actually just revisit, but anyway, you don't need this for this particular course. I'm not using it. You can use it, but then it becomes more and more content, which we don't have time for that, out of scope. So then you can actually find out what is the magnetic moment for proton. This is the value. Okay, and then you can find out what is the magnetic moment for neutron. This is the value. So you might ask that if you consider the magnetic moment, or the so in general we can talk about the nuclear magnetron. Okay, so the nuclear magneton for proton is basically nothing but this value, and for neutron is this value. But the question is that if you consider this mu n, okay, if you mu n, neutron, basically it is nothing but chargeless. Okay, how does it have a mu n value? So this was actually experimentally observed, and why it has a value of mu n is because of the reason that this is not fundamental. It has quarks with it, so those charges of the quark contribute to the value of mu n. Okay, to this value, so please remember this is the value mu n. Okay, and when I'm writing down mu small n, I'm basically considering this. Okay, so I think we have used the notation. Yeah, so we are considering this orbital magnetic moment. Okay, so if you consider orbital magnetic moment, okay, for proton and neutron, you can actually find this out. So if you look into this relation, as I told, the neutron doesn't have charge, but the thing is it is not elementary. The magnetic moment doesn't cancel out. Okay, so it does have some effect. So that's the reason that neutron also has a magnetic moment associated with it. Okay, so the quark model, after the study of the quark model, this becomes more clear. These values are also important. Okay, the G value. There are some theoretical understanding to it, but these are experimentally determined. So whatever experiments are being carried out in those big large hadron colliders, ATLAS in Switzerland, France border, also involve these kind of studies. So we are going to study about these studies in the next semester for high energy physics. That's a part of the syllabus. So when we consider a neutron, it has got a spin half h cross. The quarks usually combine to give neutron its magnetic moment, as I said. So if you are confused, the neutron doesn't have charge. The magnetic moment relation shows that there should be a charge. How does neutron have magnetic moment? It's the reason is quarks. So basically you combine the magnetic moment of all the quarks and find out the total magnetic moment of the neutron. In fact, this is one of the reasons that it was understood that neutron is not fundamental. It must have some charge involved so that it has a magnetic moment. Okay? Because magnetic moment you can determine experimentally, of course, with some costly and sophisticated experiments. So the neutron magnetic moment was a puzzle before the quark model. So people saw there was a magnetic moment, but then they thought that, okay, how can it be? Neutron is starless because we already know about it. But then people started working on this. The elementary particle model came up, and then people talked about quarks, and then these things becomes more and more clear. So this might be a very important objective question for your exam, that why neutron has a magnetic moment despite it being chargeless. So you have to just write down that relation and tell about quarks. Might be this slide will help you out.